Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Ricardo, and I work as a mentor at UXT. And today, we're diving into a challenge that almost every creative professional faces at some point, having incredible work that is unfortunately being buried by a website that just doesn't do it justice. We often spend so much time polishing our client projects that our own digital front door becomes an afterthought, a bit cluttered, a little uncertain, and frankly, not reflecting the level of talent we actually bring to the table. Today, we're looking at a specific transformation. I'm joined by Claire, a UX designer and former UX Tree student mentee, whose work was great, but whose portfolio was acting as a bottleneck rather than a bridge. We're going to show you the before state, the hurdles she was hitting, and the exact process we used during our portfolio tune up to turn that uncertainty into a high impact, professional launchpad. Claire, let's start with where things were when we first sat down together.
Thanks, Ricardo. Yeah, when I started the UX3 mentorship program, I was applying for like so many jobs at the time, but I wasn't really getting anywhere. And I felt really stuck because I couldn't really pinpoint like the issue. I couldn't tell what was wrong with my application or my portfolio that just didn't get anywhere. And as someone who never went to college for UX and is like completely self-taught, my main problem was that I had like no idea how I or my portfolio compared in the industry. So it's actually you, Ricardo, who was the first person with a background in UX to actually look at my portfolio and give me an educated feedback. And it took, and it like to be honest, my portfolio looked fine on the surface, like it was fine. But when I was scrolling through it, I realized it just wasn't a good representation of my work or my skill set. And to be honest, it shows that layout because I liked it. Like the bento box style at the time was kind of like the trend. And yeah, my design choices were very heavily influenced by like other portfolios, but I didn't really fully understand what made a portfolio really good. So it was just not a good representation of like my own personal brand. And as I, grew as a UX designer, it very quickly was no longer a representation of my work or my skill set anymore. And yeah, like my strongest work, like the stuff I was like genuinely proud of, it was kind of like buried. It was hidden underneath like layouts that like just didn't guide anyone anywhere. Colors didn't really make sense if I'm being honest. Like yeah, my case studies just felt really crammed in, like it was forcing them to fit instead of like letting them speak. And I was like trying to show off everything that it ever made, rather than like really focusing on like two or three high quality case studies. So yeah, when I sent it to you, Ricardo, I did not feel confident in my portfolio. I was kind of like dreading the feedback a little bit, if I'm being honest. So I think that was my aha moment. That was when I kind of like realized that it's not that my work wasn't good. It was just like the representation of it was just holding me back. And up until that point, I've been like treating my portfolio like something I just like, needed to have because that's what, you know, higher managers were asking for in applications. And I didn't really see it as something that actually needed to like to work and it needed to work for me. So that's when my view shifted, like from the portfolio being a collection of my work to being a product whose only job is to advertise me to hiring managers. And yeah, I also reached out to a friend of mine for help. Um, I needed someone to like who understood the positioning in the job market a little bit better than I did. So, and also someone who knows to turn like how to turn my skill set and my like work history. I used to work like in hospitality for like 12 years, into something more marketable. And I got incredible advice from her. She runs her own business, nothing to do with UX, but she told me to treat my portfolio like an MVP, your minimal viable product. Just get it out there, test it, and see if that works for you. And if it doesn't, come back to it, iterate, and then put more work into it. And I did. But there's, a thing about MVPs is that at some point you're gonna outgrow them. And I definitely outgrown mine. And every time I tried to like, add a new case study, it felt just, harder, even though like it wasn't supposed to feel like that. Like I was forcing something new into something that just wasn't built to evolve. And the best way I can describe it was like putting a new engine into a rusty car. Like no matter how good the engine is, if the structure around is outdated, it's just gonna fall apart. It's never going to run the way it should. And that's exactly, I think, what my portfolio had become. So I kept thinking, like, maybe I just need to tweak this page, adjust the layout, rewrite a section. But I also quickly realized I didn't have like the guidance to push me in the right direction. And I was kind of like, tapping in the dark. And yeah, that frustration really hit. And no amount of editing is going to help, if I don't know what really matters in a portfolio. And I was putting in the effort, I was applying, I was redefining, improving. Yeah, but like the results just weren't matching the effort. And I started to feel like I was being misunderstood before I even got a chance to explain myself. And so I made a decision. It was like, okay, I moved from I need to fix my portfolio to no, I need a portfolio that is kind of like built around representing me and my brand. And that was the shift for me. So I got much better understanding of, the UX industry during my mentorship program, because it was the first time I was also kind of like in a UX community where I was talking to a lot of other UX designers. Before it was just me, doing freelance work by myself. And yeah, my thinking went from just, oh yeah, I need a portfolio to apply because like, power manager were asking for a portfolio to, no, I need to build, a professional brand that represents how I think, how I work, and what I bring to the table. And yeah, that's when I reached out to you, Ricardo, asking, like, even after the mentorship program, asking if you could help me with a complete redesign of my portfolio. And I knew like, I needed an outside perspective, someone who could look at everything objectively, say, okay, this is going to work, this doesn't, and here is why. Um, yeah, and I just needed somebody who has the experience to, guide me through that process because at the end of the day, I needed to build this portfolio myself. Like, this is not just something I could give to somebody else and be like, oh, yeah, just, build this up for me. I really needed to thoroughly think about it. And I think we really did a good job, you know?
When Claire and I began the portfolio tune up, our first mission wasn't to add more, it was to subtract. That we went straight into a heavy edit and audit phase. The biggest trap designers fall into is trying to show everything they've ever done, fearing that leaving something out makes them look less experienced. In reality, fluff dilutes your best work. We looked at Claire's site through a cold, clinical lens. If a recruiter only has 45 seconds, what do they need to see? We restructured the entire content hierarchy. We took her strongest case study and stopped treating it like just another gallery item. We made it the hero of the site. This wasn't just a UI update. It was a strategic shift in storytelling, so we focused on the results and the process rather than just the final mock-ups. Claire, I remember during our sessions, we talked a lot about shifting your perspective away from what do I want to show toward what does a client need to know? How did that shift feel for you?
Like I've said, I mean, it was kind of an aha moment when I fully like understood what the underlying issue was and using my portfolio for positioning and marketing rather than a collection of my word, like that was like a huge, shift in view, really to focus on the quality over quantity. So once Ricardo and I were like happy with my UX for AI case study, which is the project I was working on during my mentorship program, we kind of like moved forward from there. So it was actually Ricardo who suggested like rearranging the order of my case studies. So at first I had them in like chronological order. Um, the newest at the very top and then the oldest at the bottom. And that's where we were like, started the redesign. And I thought a chronological order made the most sense, but Ricardo had a better instinct, to be honest. So, he wanted to tell a story with my projects and showcasing my UX journey. So from where did it start to where am I now, rather than just having them in a chronological order that didn't really tell a story. So I did what any UX designer would do. I iterated and I iterated and then I iterated some more. And yeah, I think I made like 8 or 9 different wireframes just for like my landing page. And initially I tried to reuse like components from my old portfolio and reshuffle them. And that's actually where the idea, like where the layout that we have now came from. So but like the idea of telling a story was kind of like stuck in the back of my head, and like I didn't really know yet how to do that. But at some point one of my designs kind of started resembling a path, so the individual components kind of looked like stepping stones. And when Ricardo and I like reviewed that, we were like both, yeah, that's it, this is the direction that we're gonna go with. And a few more iterations later I came up with the layout that we have now. And every little detail on that page has been thought through. Like there's no fluff, there's nothing there that doesn't serve a purpose. So if you look at it now and you start at the top left, that's where you get like the most important information. It's like, what's my name, what do I do? And to the right you'll find my resume. It's just a very simple download button. And then you have the path. So that path kind of guides you through my journey. We're starting off with like my education, like moving through my case studies from like early projects to my strongest work, and then ending with my voice. So articles I've been writing to like also like show my skills and my strategic thinking. And yeah, even every case study has been chosen for like a very specific reason. So, for example, ArchiHub shows like the beginning of my UX career. That was a passion project, but I think it captures like my early like strategic thinking quite well. And even though I was kind of like at the time tapping in the dark a bit, I think it kind of like shows potential. And then you have the Hookhead Oyster that shows how I took and interpret research that I didn't do. Like if you read through my case study, you'll see that I got from my client a lot of research, and how I translate that into design. Yeah, and then you have the UX for AI one, which I think just demonstrates not just strategic thinking and like a business mindset, but also my UI skills and how I design specifically for users, you know, ending on my strongest case study. Um, and then on the bottom right, you'll find like links to how to reach out to me, LinkedIn, Substack, that kind of thing. And like even the background was a very conscious choice. So I wanted to bring in a little bit of personality. And Ricardo and I, we actually talked about it. Like, should you have your face on your resume and or portfolio, or you know, there's like a whole debate about this. So I think we kind of found a good middle ground where like you have my face kind of in the background, um, and it shows me kind of like working, and but it's a little bit obscured by the path itself. So I think that brings in that personality. And I think we did a good job, I think, redoing my portfolio and like turning it into like a marketing tool that still feels unique and like on a thing authentic representation of me. Like that taught me so much, and like also like taught me like a better understanding of the industry, and also how to like positioning myself in the market. Yeah, that brought in a lot of clarity for me. Yeah, if I could leave you with like one thing, especially if you're just starting out in UX, is treat your portfolio as an MVP. Like putting your work out there to be judged can feel incredibly intimidating. Like I remember it very well. It felt incredibly intimidating for me, and it actually delayed sending out applications for a long time, because it's like so easy to fall into the trap of like endless tweaking and redesigning, and just waiting for it to feel perfect. But like it's that cycle just never ends. So get it out there, test it, see how it performs, and if it doesn't work, that's okay. Like that's not failure, that's insight. Like take what you've learned fix what's not working and just send it out again. And if you're lucky, you get feedback from other UX designers, and worst case scenario is you're just not going to get an answer, and that's okay. And yeah, if there's like one more thing, is always remember who you're designing for. Like, your portfolio is about you, that's true, but it is built for the person reviewing it. It is built for hiring managers. That's who you're designing for. So you're not just designing for yourself. And I think that is what makes it work. Anyway, what do you think, Ricardo?
Claire, if I could leave people with one golden rule for a portfolio, it's this. Your portfolio is a product, not a scrapbook. Treat it with the same UX rigor you'd apply to a client's app. If the navigation is confusing or the value proposition isn't clear in the first 5 seconds, you've already lost the user, even if that user is a hiring manager. For me, it's been a privilege to watch Claire's site evolve from that rusty car into the high-performance machine. If you want to see what the after state looks like for yourself and see how these principles look in practice, head over to the links below to see the final results of Claire's hard work. Thank you for joining us, and happy designing!